Hi folks, today I'm going to talk about the virtual sales presentation. How to run it, how to craft it, how to think about people's brains, how to keep their attention, all sorts of stuff. It's about 60 slides. I am going to talk very fast. I am an ex-New Yorker. Here's my main thought. We can just roll into, and I'll use Zoom as my metaphorical platform for this presentation. We can just roll into Zoom and say, we got everything under control. I say, no, consciousness is required. Okay, let's remember the old days. We sat around tables, we laughed, we got to see each other's movements, we got up, we had coffee, we talked, we touched, we hugged. We'll be back there, but right now we're mostly virtual. And in fact, this is what the world looks like. On your right is a picture of a jury room, an online virtual jury room. That's what it looks like. Your peers are going to judge whether you go to prison or not. And on the left is the Brady Bunch, an old television show. This image was brought to my attention by Lisa Colan-Cuono, who runs AAR Partners, which is a large agency search firm. Lisa probably sits in more pitches than anyone. Her insights are folded into this presentation. I have some street cred. I wrote a book called The Levitan Pitch. Buy this book, win more pitches. It's sold thousands of copies. I think it's a great book. I wrote it. I think it's a great book. I mean it. Okay, winning the virtual sales presentation is about nailing the science and art. It's both. Got to do it. Okay, let's roll. Science. Here's something I've been finding. This is actually just a few days old. I've been reading about, well, the idea isn't a few days old, but a lot of writing is sort of materializes. I'll call it Zoom fatigue, non-verbal overload. And as you can see from this slide, the American Psychological Association and Stanford, these guys are getting on board, trying to figure out what goes on in our brain when we are in a Zoom presentation. So 4 quickies. Eye gaze at a close distance. I mean, you know, this is me, right? We are staring at each other, making eye contact for an hour in a sales presentation. There's cognitive load. Our brain is trying to process nonverbal signals. These are easier to do in a conference room, harder to do online. It makes the brain work harder. Our brains are primal. Let's think about that. The all-day mirror, this is an interesting one. If you don't turn off your face when you're doing a presentation, if you don't shut down your camera, you're staring at you while you present. While your friends present, you're just constantly staring at yourself, and this is like carrying a mirror around all day long. It's difficult. Finally, reduce mobility. I'm kind of sitting in my chair here, stuck in my chair, all right? Some people get up, some people move around. There's something to be said for thinking about that. Okay, science. I'm going to talk about a few things. Agency gurus, audio, lighting, camera, and background. Gurus. You should have a tech leader. All right, this is now I'm talking about a major sales presentation, even on a one-on-one. I mean, these are things you want to think about earlier. Think about the internet connection, platform, audio, video, and systems management. This is all required to get it 100% right if you can. Speaking of setup, and this is a message to your agency CEO, buy your people some quality microphones and cameras. You don't want to leave this up to chance, especially if you're pitching a major piece of business. Have a virtual producer, and this is the person that gets it all together. They should be in charge of client contact, unless there's some other point person at the agency. Assess needs. It's very good to call clients up ahead of a meeting and say, is there anything I can help you with? This works, by the way, in the physical world as well. Scheduling is important. Stagecraft, I'll get into that. Rehearsals, videos, and slides. Everything needs to be tight. Speaking of tight, manage early. Before Zooming, help the agency and client. I just mentioned that. Make sure everybody's on board. Have rules. Should everybody have their video on? You can politely ask a client this. Use the mute button. Just make sure people understand how to do this, and hide self-view, as I mentioned earlier. Staring at your face for an hour, unless you're Lady Gaga, I guess, could be somewhat disturbing. And plan backups. What do I mean by that? That's my phone number. When I do a meeting on Zoom, I always have the other person's phone number and I give them my phone number in case something breaks down. It has happened, and then you go in this weird ozone. So just plan for unfortunate problems. Let's talk about audio. Use a professional mic. Test sound in and out. Manage your noise. What room are you in? Control the noise. Yes, some of us have little kids, and that can be cute, frankly, but let's manage it. And again, mute on and off. Now, for this presentation, I'm using my Mac microphone and camera. I wanted to go base level, and we'll see actually what the quality is. I think it's pretty good, especially if my face is in that tiny little circle. Lighting. I started life as a photographer, so I understand lighting like a pro. Lighting in front, I have a light there. Darker in the background, that's a problem for me in my very bright Mexican house. I'm thinking of getting a background. On Zoom, I have custom backgrounds. I'm using Loom, L-O-O-M right now to record this. I cannot build a virtual background. This is what we often see. Someone's lit from behind. It's not a good look. If you're trying to sell something, this doesn't work. How about the camera? Okay, again, professional. Laptop camera, it's okay. That's what you're looking at right now. Think framing, where are you in the frame? You'll see what I mean in a second. Hey, Peter, love your nostrils and ceiling. Okay, that's me. You can see a camera below looking up my nose, a camera on the right looking down on my head, a camera looking at my ceiling, and in the lower right is where you want your camera positioned, where your eyes are centered. Background. Again, does your agency, when there are more of you in a Zoom pitch presentation, a sales presentation, do you look like this jury? My point here is no clutter. I mean, this is what clutter looks like. You know, there's this sort of ubiquitous bookshelf we see now in many Zoom calls. I have one behind me right now. It can get a little crazy. No weirdness. Really think through what people are looking at over your shoulder. I'll let this cartoon sink in for a second. All right, no bondage in the background. Virtual image replacement. Do you have an agency look? This is debatable, should you look in lockstep or not, but here are a couple of examples of things to think about. One, if somebody's in a bedroom, home office, closet, is it working for your brand? And think through custom backgrounds. There are great options. Here are a couple. It's a company called Trillion on the left, and then on the right is the Newark downtown district. These guys look like pros. They're well lit. They're well branded. Think about this. Art. Okay. There's something interesting in the art world, and that is the forgetting curve. We know through the study of neuroscience that people forget over time. We all know this. So I think it's a critical factor in how you craft your presentation. I talk about this much more in the book, but I'm going to address it here quickly. Okay. I always, whenever I give a talk on presentations, tell people to look at, relook at, hopefully they've done it more than 2, 3, 4, 5 times, Steve Jobs, the introduction of the iPad. What he's done here is he's rolled out slowly what he's about to do. I'm going to read this. So 3 things. I think he might be more articulate that. So 3 things: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communications device. An iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. An iPod, a phone. Are you getting it? The audience is screaming now. These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device, and we are calling it the iPhone. This guy knows how to present. Study him. Okay, back to some other geniuses. Aristotle and Dr. King. Aristotle, let me go back a second, sorry. Aristotle is known for saying, tell them what you're going to tell them again, and then tell them one more time. I'm paraphrasing. And Dr. King is known for repetition. A pretty good presenter as well. Also, be memorable and unignorable. That's one of my favorite words, unignorable. And I refer to O.J.'s gloves. If you're too young to remember the O.J. trial, there are movies, there are films, but Johnny Cochran, O.J.'s attorney, had O.J. put on one of the bloody gloves found on the scene. And O.J., as a great actor, could not get the glove on his hand. And Johnny Cochran said the most memorable line, I think, in the courtroom: if it doesn't fit, you must quit. One line to remember. A quickie on the Salvation Army. One of my agency clients asked me to help them pitch the Salvation Army. I'm going to say this very fast. As you know, I've been talking quickly. I told the agency to lead with an insight. They went away, and their insight that they garnered from a Google research study was that of the 5 leading charities in the United States, the one that needed the money the least, the one perceived to need the money the least, was the Salvation Army. This is what they said to the Salvation Army right at the beginning of the presentation. Salvation Army never looked at it this way. The agency essentially won the pitch, and it was very, very memorable. Whatever the agency said in the rest of the pitch, this is what the Salvation Army remembered. People didn't need to give them money. Art. So let's talk about this. Repetition, pick one, attention or distraction, stagecraft, brain management. So beware of the distraction zone. I think it's really important to, I'm going to look down at my picture here. I think it's important to pay attention to the people you're presenting to. Are they falling asleep? What kind of visual cues are they doing? This can get, as we've seen, and I'm going to show you a picture that was a famous 2020 picture. This can lead to moments where people think that they're spacing out in a room and maybe doing something else. In this case, if you don't know what Jerry Tubin did, I suggest that you look it up. This was a major fail. You might say, well, this would never happen to me, but what are you doing when you space out 20 minutes into someone else's presentation? Stagecraft, great word, I love it. Be human. Make eye contact. Decide to sit or stand, posture, gesture, voice, sit up straight, all those things like mommy told you. Meeting management. Guide the client through the presentation. Tell them what's coming. Where are you in the program? I'm about halfway through, if not a little more. I'm guiding you. Tame the PowerPoint. As you can see, I have a look that I've had for years. I try to keep it simple, stupid. Have a plan, flow, and please rehearse. I wrote a great blog post, and it's also a story in my book, The Worst Presentation Ever, the worst advertising agency presentation. I was with Mara Saatchi and Charles Saatchi. We did not win the global Adidas account. It's a wonderful story of huge mistakes, including not rehearsing. And in the book, I have a bunch of cartoons. This is my don't rehearse cartoon, as in a mistake. I've seen it, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, meeting management. Again, Aristotle, as I mentioned, tell them what you're going to tell them again and again and again and again. Well, maybe 3 times, but you get the idea. You have to reinforce your major points. You can't just let them hang and say, oh, I did it in the first 10 minutes. Now that we're at the 60-second mark, it's time to go home. Don't do it. Understand the law of primacy and recency. And what does this mean? This means that people remember, and I'm going to simplify this, the first thing you told them and the last thing you told them. And in the middle, they get lost. That doesn't mean it works for every presentation. And if it's a client that's going to spend a lot of money with you, they're going to pay attention. But this works. They'll remember what you told them at the beginning and what you told them at the end, so plan accordingly. And I think this is exacerbated in the virtual space. Now I'm going to tell you a story about a pitch, a dating pitch. Okay, it's a love story. In this case, a 2020, early 2020 online presentation, which I think is interesting because they got it right. All right, what was the background? It was an agency pitching a major dating app in the Hispanic dating market. So here was the setup. Clients were distributed around the country, and the agencies were in multiple offices or bedrooms or closets, wherever they were. They used Zoom and PowerPoint, and the goal was to be friendly and fun. This was a pitch about dating. Serious business, but a pitch about dating. So what did they do? They introduced the agency ahead of the meeting by sending an intro video and created an Instagram page. Is that what it's called? An Instagram platform where the different people in the agency talked about dating and so forth. And all of this was sent to the client. It avoided what I call biospeak, where we're all sitting around saying, I went to Harvard, I was thrown out of Harvard, I was thrown out of Boston University, I went to art school, I live in Brooklyn, I have 2 chihuahuas. You get the idea. Always have names and or titles in the Zoom frame so people know who's talking and who are you. Here's something the agency did. They divided the presentation, it was about an hour, into 3-minute chunks. Okay? They had core people that were in the presentation all the time, but they brought other people in and out, appropriately brought them in and out. They had friendship duo videos, interviews that they had done ahead of time, which wowed the client because these interviews were with the target market talking about dating and falling in love, and the client ate it up. The agency also said, we have more videos, we'll share them with you after the presentation. They also had influencer videos. They were using influencers and even brought in a couple to be introduced during the meeting. So you got to do some planning here. The leader drove interaction. There was one person leading the meeting. There were questions and polling and chat. There were various tools that they used to keep people interested. And they're very conscious of how they ended the meeting because I have seen too many presentations where people look at the last slide and go, okay, that's it, everybody, goodbye, and people get up and wander around. Even worse online where some are clicking off and not. You don't know if you're live anymore. It can be a problem. Okay, I'm driving this one home. Think about the last stuff you do because the forgetting curve starts happening as soon as everybody gets up. Okay. I'm a big fan of smart follow-up, and I'll show you two things. On the left is the Instagram account that has the agency's CEO, and his personality is drilled into that Instagram account, and that Instagram account was 100% dedicated to that client. On the right is a website example that I used when I pitched the 5-state, 100,000 employee Providence healthcare account on the West Coast. This is when I had my own agency. We sent them a follow-up website. The advantage of that is, one, people remember what you told them and they can share it with their colleagues who were not in the meeting, or even worse, their colleagues who fell asleep during the Zoom presentation. Okay, ta-da, a recap. Have a company plan. This is not something that you roll into and say, we'll work it out when we're in there. Again, I'll just refer back to my pitch with Marasachi. We did not have a plan. It was a glorious and elegant mess. Remember Aristotle, Martin Luther King, repetition, and OJ. What is that single thing people need to remember? Keep it lean and flowing. Just please make sure that things are happening. And remember that people remember the beginning and the end. This is really critical. I learned this from a neuroscientist. Oh, speaking of that neuroscientist, I have 4 podcast shows on virtual sales on this very subject on my podcast, which is called Advertising Stories. Remember, I wrote the book, The Levitan Pitch. Levitan Pitch, buy this book, win more pitches. And finally, and if you want, send me an email, peter@peterlevitan.com. I talk to people. I don't charge people to talk to me. I like to have conversations. That is it. I hope you enjoyed it. This is the virtual world of sales today. Thanks for stopping by.